Welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're tackling a pretty big topic. The idea that the Quran can have a positive impact on your life. Not just in this world, but also in the afterlife.
Right.
And I know some of you might be thinking, whoa, hold on, the Quran? That's pretty heavy stuff. But trust me, you don't need any prior knowledge to follow along with us.
Yeah.
We're going to start from scratch.
Yeah.
And I think you might be surprised how relevant this ancient text can be to your life today, even if you've never even opened a Quran before.
Absolutely. What I think is so fascinating about the Quran is that it offers guidance on so many different aspects of life, from the very practical things
Right.
to the more deeply spiritual questions. It touches on how we interact with each other, how we deal with our own internal struggles.
Yeah.
It's really quite comprehensive.
I was looking through some excerpts in preparation for this, and one thing that really jumped out at me was the emphasis on treating others with kindness and fairness, especially those who are less fortunate.
Absolutely. There are verses in the Quran that specifically talk about the importance of taking care of orphans, the poor, the needy, and for instance, there's a verse that says, "And know that whatever thing you gain, a fifth of it belongs to Allah and to the messenger and to the near relatives and the orphans and the needy and the wayfarer, if you have believed in Allah and in what we revealed to our servant on the day of distinction, the day the two armies met. And Allah over all things is competent."
Wow. A fifth of your gains. That's a pretty significant portion. That's like a built-in system of social responsibility, making sure that wealth is shared and those in need are supported.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just the financial support.
Okay.
The Quran also really stresses the importance of treating everyone with respect and compassion, regardless of their social status or background.
So it's like laying the groundwork for a more just and equitable society.
I think that's a great way to put it, yeah.
And what about personal behavior? I mean, are there specific things that the Quran encourages or discourages?
Yes, definitely. There are verses that advise against things like excessive drinking, gambling. The Quran really highlights how these activities can lead to negative consequences, not just for individuals, but for society as a whole.
It seems like the Quran is promoting a balanced and mindful way of living.
Yeah.
Where you're aware of the potential consequences of your actions, and you're striving to make choices that benefit both yourself and others.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. The Quran really emphasizes that we are accountable for our actions.
Right.
And encourages us to constantly strive to improve ourselves.
That idea of accountability, I noticed that was a recurring theme in the passages that I was looking at.
Yeah.
And I noticed there were several verses that mentioned the Day of Judgment.
Right.
Can you maybe shed some light on what that means?
Yeah, the Day of Judgment, that's a central concept in Islam. It's believed to be a time when all of our actions, both good and bad, will be weighed and judged by God. And the Quran uses some very vivid imagery to describe this day.
Right.
It's really emphasizing the importance of living a righteous life.
Yeah. I can imagine for someone who's never encountered this concept before, the idea of a final judgment might seem pretty intense. So can you maybe break it down a bit? What does the Quran actually say about what happens on this day, and how does that relate to how we live our lives now?
Okay. Well, imagine a giant scale.
Okay.
All right. And on one side, you have all the good deeds that you've done in your life. Acts of kindness, charity, honesty, and so on. And then on the other side, you have the negative actions, the times you were selfish or dishonest or hurt others. And the Quran says that on the Day of Judgment, God will weigh these deeds. And if the good outweighs the bad, you'll be rewarded. But if the bad outweighs the good, there will be consequences.
So it's not just about blindly following rules. It's about genuinely trying to be a good person and live a life that's in line with your values.
Exactly. Yeah. The Quran really stresses the importance of having sincere belief and acting with righteousness.
Right.
Not just going through the motions.
So this whole concept of a day of judgment, it's a pretty powerful motivator to reflect on your choices.
Yeah.
And make sure you're living a life that you can be proud of.
Absolutely.
It's like having a cosmic accountability partner.
That's a great analogy, yeah.
And I think that kind of ties into another important theme that I noticed in the Quran.
Okay.
Which is the importance of seeking knowledge and understanding.
Yes, absolutely. The Quran repeatedly emphasizes the value of learning, reflecting, and using our intellect to understand the world around us. It encourages us to ask questions, to think critically, and to constantly strive for personal growth.
So it's not about blind faith. It's about seeking understanding and actively engaging with the teachings of the Quran.
Precisely. Yeah. It's about using your intellect and your heart to really grasp the deeper meaning and apply those lessons to your life.
I'm starting to see how the Quran can be seen as a guidebook, for navigating life's challenges and becoming a better version of yourself. It's not just about the afterlife, it's about living a more meaningful and fulfilling life right here, right now.
Absolutely. The Quran really does offer a wealth of wisdom that can help us navigate our relationships, our desires, and our responsibilities
Okay.
in a way that leads to both individual and collective well-being.
This is fascinating. We've already covered so much, and it seems like we've just scratched the surface. What else does the Quran have to say about how we should live our lives?
Well, one area where the Quran offers some pretty powerful insights is in its critique of power and wealth.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. Tell me more about that.
The Quran is surprisingly critical of those who hoard wealth, exploit others, and let power corrupt them.
You don't often hear religious texts openly criticizing the wealthy and powerful. What kind of examples does the Quran use to illustrate this point?
Well, there's several stories in the Quran about civilizations that were destroyed
Okay.
because of their arrogance and their misuse of power.
So it's not just about individual behavior, it's about holding entire societies accountable for their actions.
Exactly. The Quran reminds us that even the most powerful empires and civilizations are not immune to the consequences of injustice and oppression.
Wow, that's a powerful message. I'm eager to hear more about these stories and how they relate to our lives today.
So you mentioned those stories about civilizations that faced consequences for their misuse of power.
Right.
One that comes to mind is the story of the people of Ed.
Oh yeah, I remember reading about them. They were known for their incredible strength and their massive buildings, right?
Exactly. Yeah, they were incredibly powerful and prosperous. Right.
But their strength and wealth led them to arrogance.
Okay.
They rejected the prophets who came to them with messages of guidance. They refused to acknowledge any power greater than themselves. Essentially, they believed they were untouchable.
So they had all this worldly power, but lacked humility and a sense of accountability.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
What ultimately happened to them?
Well, their arrogance ultimately led to their downfall.
Okay.
They were struck by this devastating windstorm that lasted for days
Wow.
and wiped them out entirely.
That's a pretty dramatic end. It's like a classic cautionary tale about the dangers of hubris
Yeah.
and the importance of recognizing that there are forces beyond our control.
Precisely, yeah. And there's another story, equally compelling, I think, about the people of Thamud.
I remember reading something about them too. Weren't they skilled at carving their homes into mountains? Yes, they were known for their impressive architecture, carving elaborate dwellings into solid rock. And like the Odd, they were warned by prophets to change their ways, but they refused to listen.
Did something happen with a camel? I feel like that rings a bell.
You're right. You're right. A prophet named Salah was sent to the Thamud with a she-camel as a sign from God.
Okay.
And he warned them not to harm her, but they defied him and killed the camel.
So they literally killed the messenger, or at least the messenger's camel. That's a bold move.
It was an act of defiance, yeah,
Yeah.
and it had dire consequences. The Thamud were struck by a catastrophic earthquake and a thunderous noise that led to their complete destruction.
Okay, so we've got two stories here. We've got the Odd wiped out by a windstorm. We've got the Thamud destroyed by an earthquake.
Right.
Both civilizations were incredibly powerful and advanced in their own ways.
Mm-hmm.
But their misuse of power and their refusal to heed warnings led to their downfall. It's a pretty sobering message.
It is, yeah, and it's a message that resonates throughout the Quran, this idea that power and wealth,
Right.
if not used responsibly and with humility, can corrupt and ultimately lead to destruction.
Makes you think about all the empires and societies that have risen and fallen throughout history.
Yeah.
Were their downfalls simply due to bad luck or strategic blunders?
Yeah.
Or were there deeper, more moral causes at play?
Yeah, the Quran really suggests that a society's moral compass plays a vital role in its fate.
Okay.
You know, when societies prioritize justice, compassion, and accountability, they tend to flourish. But when they become consumed by greed, oppression, and arrogance, they sow the seeds of their own demise.
So it's not just about individual salvation.
Right.
It's about creating a just and compassionate society that can thrive and endure.
Exactly. Yeah. And this brings us back to the idea that the Quran can guide us toward living better lives, not just in a spiritual sense, but in a way that impacts how we interact with the world around us, how we treat others, and how we use whatever power and influence we might have.
It makes me think about the responsibility we all have, whether we're incredibly wealthy and powerful or just everyday people,
Yeah.
to use our resources and influence wisely
Yeah.
and to, contribute to creating a better world. If someone wanted to learn more about these concepts and how they can apply them to their own lives, what advice would you give them?
That's a great question. I mean, there are so many ways to engage with the Quran and learn from it.
Hmm.
Some people find it helpful to start by reading translations, perhaps focusing on chapters or verses that really resonate with them. Others might prefer listening to recitations or engaging in discussions with those who have knowledge of the Quran. I think the key is to approach it with an open mind
Right. So,
and a willingness to learn.
and I imagine there are also a ton of resources available online,
Right.
like websites and podcasts and even online courses.
Yeah, the digital age has made accessing information and connecting with others who share your interests easier than ever before.
It's pretty amazing to think that we can tap into, centuries of wisdom and guidance right from our fingertips.
It is.
So much of what we've discussed today feels incredibly relevant to the challenges we face in the modern world. It's like the Quran offers a timeless roadmap for navigating the complexities of life and building a more just and compassionate society.
It really does, yeah. And it reminds us that the pursuit of knowledge and understanding is a lifelong journey,
Hmm.
a journey that can lead to a more meaningful and fulfilling life.
We've covered so much ground already, but I'm curious to dive into some specific verses that illustrate these principles in action.
Okay. Well, there are so many powerful verses to choose from. One that comes to mind is a verse regarding the treatment of orphans. And do not approach the orphan's property except in a way that is best until he reaches maturity, and fulfill every commitment. Indeed, the commitment is ever that about which one will be questioned.
So it's not just about avoiding doing harm to orphans, it's about actively protecting their interests
Yeah.
and ensuring their well-being. It's about going above and beyond to fulfill our obligations to those who are vulnerable.
Precisely. And this principle extends beyond orphans. It's a call for safeguarding the vulnerable in society and fulfilling our commitments with honesty and integrity.
That's a pretty solid foundation for building a just and equitable society.
Absolutely. Then there are verses that offer guidance on resolving conflicts peacefully. For example, and if you fear dissension between two groups, send an arbitrator from his people and an arbitrator from her people. If they both desire reconciliation, Allah will cause it between them. Indeed, Allah is ever knowing and acquainted with all things.
So it encourages seeking mediation and finding peaceful solutions rather than letting conflicts escalate into something destructive.
Yes. And it really highlights the importance of communication, empathy, and seeking common ground. There's another verse that's always resonated with me. And do not insult those they invoke other than Allah, lest they insult Allah in enmity without knowledge. Thus, we have made pleasing to every community their deeds. Then to their Lord is their return, and he will inform them about what they used to do.
That one speaks volumes about the need for respect and understanding.
Yeah.
Even when dealing with people who have different beliefs than our own,
Yeah.
it's about recognizing the inherent dignity of every human being,
Yeah.
regardless of their faith or background.
It's a reminder that judging or belittling others' beliefs ultimately leads to division and hostility. It's about fostering a culture of tolerance and constructive dialogue, which feels incredibly important in our increasingly polarized world.
Absolutely. These verses offer practical guidance for navigating complex situations,
Yeah.
fostering peace and building stronger, more harmonious relationships. Yeah, it's amazing how, these verses from the Quran offer such practical advice for navigating challenges and building a more peaceful and just world. It really does feel like a timeless guidebook in a way.
It is. And there's another verse that speaks directly to the pursuit of peace. And if they incline to peace, then incline to it also, and rely upon Allah. Indeed, it is He who is the hearing, the knowing.
So even in the midst of conflict, the Quran encourages us to seek peaceful resolutions.
It emphasizes that peace should always be the ultimate goal,
Right.
even if it requires compromise and letting go of personal grievances.
Yeah.
And it highlights the importance of trusting in a higher power for guidance and support.
Yeah, this idea of trusting in a higher power, in God, seems to be woven throughout the Quran.
Absolutely. Here's a verse that beautifully illustrates that concept. And whoever relies upon Allah, then he is sufficient for him. Indeed, Allah will accomplish his purpose. Allah has already set for everything a decreed extent.
It's a powerful reminder that we're not alone in our struggles.
Yeah.
That there's a higher power who's got our backs, who can provide comfort and guidance when we need it most.
Yeah. And that message of hope and support, that's a central theme in the Quran.
Right.
It encourages us to strive for righteousness, to treat others with compassion, and to live lives of purpose and meaning, knowing that we are never truly alone in our journey.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive. I mean, we've explored how the Quran offers guidance on everything from personal accountability and ethical behavior to building just societies and seeking peace.
It's been a fascinating exploration, of how this ancient text continues to offer wisdom and insights that are incredibly relevant to our lives today.
So as we wrap up here, what's the one key takeaway you hope our listeners will remember from our conversation?
I'd say that the core message is that the Quran offers a path toward a more fulfilling and meaningful life, both in this world and the next. It encourages us to strive for goodness, to seek knowledge, and to build a world that reflects the values of compassion, justice, and peace.
It's a powerful reminder that wisdom can be found in unexpected places, even in texts that might seem ancient or unfamiliar. And who knows, maybe this deep dive has sparked a curiosity in you to explore the Quran further on your own.
Yeah, if you're looking for guidance, inspiration, or simply a new perspective on life, the Quran has something to offer everyone.
Well, thanks for joining us on this incredible journey of discovery. And remember, there's always more to learn and explore no matter where your path